Hello and welcome to the Autistic Witch. My name is Claire and I started doing these videos to help people who are autistic and who also identify themselves as a witch. So what I wanted to talk about today in this video is some of the challenges that I faced and that I've had, especially over the last few weeks really. So I've not been making many videos, and really that's because I've not really felt up to doing that. So one of the things that I've also noticed is that when things get difficult and things become more challenging for me, a lot of the tools and techniques that I've developed of my practice, actually, it's almost like I lose the ability to use them or forget that they're there. And it's quite frustrating actually, because I know that these things will help me. I know that if I ground myself, if I center myself, if I go within, if I do my ritual and honour the four corners, light my sage, light a candle, and start to invoke spirit and go within, I will always feel better and I will always feel more connected. But, life takes over. And sometimes life gets a bit messy and you get sort of wrapped up in other stuff and it can become challenging. So I believe this is what's been happening over the last few weeks. Things have got a bit challenging and I haven't been connecting and I haven't been able to ground myself in the same way and use the tools and techniques that I already have. So what I wanted to do was to talk a little bit about that and also my ADHD, because this is something that has become more prominent, particularly as I've begun to hit perimenopause. So as my hormonal changes started to happen, ADHD symptoms have become more acute, have been showing up more, and I also have found that it's very common for people with autism to also have ADHD. This isn't unusual to have a dual diagnosis. So yeah, I pretty much self-diagnosed myself after my autism diagnosis. And sometimes I regret, in a way, doing it that way round, having my autism diagnosis first instead of ADHD, because what has been happening is there's a whole myriad of challenges, and certainly over the last few years, as the waiting lists have grown longer and longer, certainly here in England, it's become more of a challenge to get a diagnosis and to get medication. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the frustrations that I've had. And I realised, when I started this process, I was probably a bit naive. So I was aware that the waiting list was very long, that we were talking sort of 4 years typically. And I thought, ADHD, don't have the patience for that. Got frustrated, decided to go and get myself a private diagnosis. Now, that's okay. I have seen consultants privately before. I had to go down the private route to get my EDS diagnosis. This is Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is considered a rare genetic disorder. I question how rare this actually is. I suspect it's a little bit like autism and ADHD in women, and it's possibly been, sidelined misdiagnosed and all that comes with that. So anyway, I've previously seen consultants privately, and what's happened is they've given me a diagnosis, I've gone to the GP, they've recommended medication, and the GP has been able to prescribe that medication. So when I began this process, I had no reason to doubt that this would be any different. Oh my goodness, did I discover it was not only extremely different, but going to present lots and lots of challenges. So anyway, as I say, I went for a private diagnosis, got my diagnosis, then discovered that I could not access medication. Not only could the GP not prescribe this particular type of medication, but I had to go back to the private provider to negotiate getting the medication. Not only would that have meant paying privately for the medication, which was the cost was going to be huge and something that I could not afford, I also discovered that there were other complications to this process. So there's something in England called shared care. This is an agreement between a private provider and the NHS. And this shared care is a voluntary agreement. So let's say your GP is struggling funding wise and doesn't want to take you on. They can legally say no to taking on your care. And I also discovered not only that, but even if they'd agreed and said, yes, we agree to shared care, I would still have to pay this private provider a fee, and that would be continual. That that fee would be obviously for as long as I needed that medication for. So I very quickly realised there were some serious issues here financially for me, and I found it incredibly frustrating. So I soon realised that the diagnosis that I'd paid for privately was pretty much worthless to me because I wasn't able to take it any further. And the only way I could access medication through the NHS would be to wait on their 42-month waiting list to have to go through the diagnosis again and then access medication. Okay, so I then started thinking, well, what other options do I have? And I discovered there's this thing called a right to choose. Again, it's a bit complicated and messy. And what this is it's a private provider this time. Same providers very often that do the private diagnosis are also offering the NHS help to reduce their waiting lists. So what they're doing is they're saying you can choose us and the NHS will pay for your diagnosis through the right to choose. Then I realised there were difficulties with this also, because once I approached the right to choose providers, they then turned around and said, oh, I'm really sorry, you've already paid for this privately, we can't offer this, you can't do this again. And I was like, oh, hang on a minute. So again, I was blocked from getting a diagnosis through the NHS route and blocked again from accessing the medication. So I found myself in this really difficult situation. I'm in the process of changing GPs. I am starting to look at other options. I really don't know what else to do at this point other than to sit and wait 42 months for an NHS diagnosis. I've also discovered it's not as simple as just getting the diagnosis after 42 months. That then there's another delay in terms of it. The process is in two parts. So you have one part, the first part where they assess you, and the second part where they look at medication, and then you have to wait again to go through this thing called titration. And I'm just like, what? So not only do I have to go through, nearly 4 years of waiting, but then there's also potentially another year of trying to get the medication. So this whole process is just so messed up, and it's infuriating and frustrating. So of course, have I been practicing my witchcraft stuff? Have I been doing my rituals? No, I've been wrapped up in all of this messy, difficult, challenging stuff, trying to get a diagnosis, trying to access medication, trying to get the right support. And I just feel like I'm being blocked, and I'm going round in circles, and I'm being left stranded at all levels. And I just, I don't have words for this. It's infuriating. So yeah, there's been lots of things like that that's been going on, and I know I'm not alone. I have managed to find other groups who are online and having these kind of conversations. And sadly, I'm finding that there are many women who are experiencing these kind of struggles, who are experiencing these kind of frustrations, who are, if they've gone down the private route, then struggling to pay for their medication, having GPs refuse shared care, having, shared care being delayed because it's not in the GP's interest to take it on. So, the whole thing is really, messy. And I'm feeling, I am one of many undiagnosed women who have been left really in the wilderness, who have been left struggling, left to get by, left to, battle their way through all of this. And I've had a lot of feelings about being a weirdo, being a freak, being an alien, and I know that's not unusual for people who have autism, but also with the ADHD as well, I've been left feeling, really frustrated, angry, stranded, left sort of just feel sometimes like I'm drowning in all this stuff and all these emotions, all this clutter in my head, all this it's not just it's everything. It's every aspect of my life. If someone was to ask me, how does your autism and ADHD affect you? It's like, where do you start? It affects every single aspect of my life, everything. So yes, I feel that this is something that we should be angry about, that we should be shouting about, but instead, I'm hearing things, particularly in the media. Oh, it's a trend, it's a fad. These women are just wanting attention, they can't really be that bad. Look, you've got through your life this far. How bad can it be? Well, yeah, I think I now realise that I've covered up a lot in my life. I have masked a lot in my life. And because of that, I've actually found it really hard to verbalize how much of an impact this has had and what is going on in my life. So in many ways, doing my witchcraft stuff has been my little place of sanctuary. It's offered me a way to, it's given me that little bit of relief. It's given me a focus away from all of the emotional and mental clutter that I have, and it's enabled me to just ground and connect with the divine. So yeah, what I know there must be other people out there who have experienced these difficulties, these challenges. I know you guys are out there. And what I wanted to do was to say, it's okay, keep going, keep fighting. But as well, try and remember you have tools. I have the tools to help myself. I just have to remember they're there, remember to use them, and keep connecting to my divine spiritual energy and keep connecting to my inner being. So thank you for listening to my little rant about ADHD. As I say, I know there will be others who identify with this. So please feel free to comment, subscribe and like, and you know, I will try and respond to any comments that people have, and you know, don't feel alone. So thank you from the Autistic Witch.